I'm Drew Brannon. I have land. It's been my family since 1855, and it encompasses the north side. The horseshoe makes the three horseshoe North Carolina, the French Broad making a circle. And on the north side of the horseshoe, about a mile of river frontage or more. And I go back to my great grandfather, John Seton, owned the property, and the Mountain Lily would have to go right by our property. And the reason it was considered 1881 because it would be easier to go by river to Icefield, from Brevard to Icefield would have been easier than the roads. They weren't very good roads in 1881, so that's the reason. And he thought it'd be a profitable venture, but it turned out it wasn't as good because when they measured, they didn't measure how high the bridges was, and it would not go under one of the bridges. The factual background is that the Mountain Lily was to carry freight and passengers between the French Broad, on the French Broad River, Brevard to Icefield. It was owned by Colonel Sidney Vance Pickens of Hendersonville. I think that there was, I can't document this, but I think there was stock sold like the stock market in his venture. But I don't have documentation on that, and I was told word of mouth, and I can't get documentation either, that my John Seton, my great grandfather, might have talked a little, but that's not documented. The Mountain Lily was 90 feet long with 2 decks, a stateroom to encompass 100 passengers. On the first voyage, there's about 100 people would try to get on the boat, but it never worked out because it was just too high to go under the bridges. And here's kind of a copy, and here's a replica of the Mountain Lily. It kind of grounded it, the horseshoe, and then they pushed it out, and then it finally became, in 1885, it became grounded for sure near Haywood Road. So it never became a success that Colonel Vance envisioned. Vance Pickens envisioned this as an opportunity for people to make money, but it never ventured because of this, and it was disassembled, and part of it went to the 2 engines were used as sawmills later on. And also they had the bell. Is it Horseshoe Baptist Church came out of the Mountain Lily. It's documented, and it's in service there. And some of the wood could have been used as part of one of the buildings of the churches there, but I don't have documentation on that either. But it was this is a fascinating adventure in the history of the French Broad and the Mountain Lily. And documentation, the French Broad is one of the oldest rivers in the world. And I don't remember where it's, but it's top for an ancient river. And like I say, my whole life has been lived along the French Broad River. We have crops. We had a big dairy farm, and I lease my land out now at one time, and had documentation on the history of the French Broad that ties into Mountain Lily. In 1916 was the worst flood in the history of Henderson County. It was numerous lives lost and livestock. My grandfather and daddy remember they were chicken coops, chickens, and buildings going down the French Broad in 1916. It was a terrible, terrible tragedy for the people of Henderson County. And further on down the river in the Edenville community, there was people were in a house and they didn't know the flood was coming. It washed them all away, and all of them perished except one small baby. It was wrapped in like a blanket, and it was in the palm of a tree, and so they were able to save the baby in this 1916 flood. But if you go over to Icefield, you can go over and see on the building how high it got. If you float down the French Broad River, there's a mark that shows exactly how high the river was on this building. to say have a deep appreciation for the French Broad River and for the history, and the Mount Lily is really a good presentation for the history of our area.